I stood in my parents' living room watching my sister Jessica scream about losing everything, demanding I sell my farmland to save her crumbling life. Mom and Dad nodded in agreement, calling it my family duty. Jessica spat venom about how I wasted my potential marrying Cole, a simple farmer, while she married Brad, a brilliant finance executive. The room fell dead silent when Cole quietly spoke up, revealing the shocking truth about who actually owned all the land around our small Ohio farming community. What happened next changed everything forever. 3 years earlier, I never imagined my wedding day would become the starting point for years of family torment. Standing in that converted barn in Millbrook, Ohio, surrounded by autumn decorations and the scent of hay, I felt nothing but pure joy marrying Cole Thompson, the man who had stolen my heart during my senior year at Ohio State. Cole was everything I never knew I wanted. Quiet where other men were, loud, thoughtful where others were reckless, and deeply rooted to the land his grandfather had farmed for decades. His calloused hands told stories of honest work, and his gentle brown eyes held wisdom that came from understanding the rhythm of seasons and the patience required to nurture growing things. But my sister Jessica saw none of that poetry. She arrived 45 minutes late to my ceremony, her high heels clicking dramatically across the wooden floors as she made her grand entrance in a designer dress that cost more than most people spent on their entire wedding. Her perfectly straightened blonde hair and flawless makeup looked completely out of place among the country elegance I had chosen for my special day. During the reception, I watched Jessica corner our cousin Emma near the dessert table. She spoke just loudly enough for others to overhear her voice dripping with manufactured sympathy. "I just cannot believe Heather is throwing her life away like this," Jessica said, gesturing toward Cole as he chatted with my college friends. "She has a business degree from Ohio State, and she is choosing to become a farmer's wife. Can you imagine all that education just to end up collecting eggs and canning vegetables?" Emma shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward me. "Jessica, maybe you should keep your voice down. Heather looks happy." "Happy?" Jessica laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. She could have had any career she wanted. She could have moved to Columbus or Cleveland, worked for a real corporation, made something of herself. Instead, she is going to spend her life in this tiny town worrying about crop prices and weather patterns. That was when Brad appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist with practiced confidence. Bradley Morrison was everything Jessica valued in a man. Tall, expensively dressed with perfectly styled dark hair, and a smile that seemed designed for closing business deals. He worked as an investment advisor in Columbus, drove a silver BMW, and lived in a downtown condo that Jessica never stopped describing in elaborate detail. "What are we discussing?" Brad asked, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and condescension that successful salesmen master. "My poor sister's questionable life choices," Jessica replied, not bothering to lower her voice. "Heather is marrying a corn farmer." Brad looked across the room at Cole, who was helping my elderly great-aunt to her seat with gentle care. "Farming," Brad said thoughtfully, as if considering a particularly boring stock option. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it, though I cannot imagine choosing that lifestyle when there are so many opportunities in finance and investment. The agricultural sector is becoming increasingly automated anyway. Small family farms are basically obsolete." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but before I could respond, Jessica was already launching into her next attack. "The worst part is that Mom and Dad are pretending to be supportive," she continued. "But I heard them talking last night. They are disappointed. They spent all that money on Heather's education, and she is going to waste it playing house on a farm." The truth in that statement hit harder than I cared to admit. My parents had indeed seemed subdued when I announced my engagement to Cole. They had met him several times and were always polite, but I sensed their reservations. They wanted their daughters to climb social and economic ladders, not plant roots in small-town soil. Cole appeared beside me, then carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. His presence immediately calmed the storm building in my chest. He handed me a glass and smiled, completely unaware of the conversation that had just taken place. "Your grandmother is asking for you," he said softly. She wants to give us her blessing before we cut the cake. As we walked toward Grandma Rose, I heard Jessica behind us, her voice rising with excitement. "Oh, Brad, I almost forgot to tell everyone our news," she announced loudly, causing conversations around us to pause. "Brad proposed last week, and we are planning the most incredible wedding. We are thinking destination ceremony in the Bahamas, maybe the Atlantis resort. Brad says we should spare no expense since we will only do this once." The room filled with congratulations and excited chatter. Jessica basked in the attention, describing wedding plans that sounded more expensive than most people's annual salaries. She talked about designer gowns, professional photographers, and a honeymoon that would take them to 3 different countries. Cole squeezed my hand gently. "Your grandmother is waiting," he reminded me quietly. We spent the rest of the evening focused on our own celebration, but Jessica's words echoed in my mind. Was I really throwing my life away? Was I settling for something smaller than I deserved? Later that night, as Cole and I sat on the porch of the farmhouse that would become our home, I voiced my doubts. "Do you think I am making a mistake?" I asked, watching fireflies dance across the fields that stretched beyond our yard. Cole was quiet for a long moment, considering his words carefully, as he always did. "Heather, I would never want you to sacrifice your dreams for mine. If you think you would be happier in some corporate office in Columbus, then maybe we should talk about that." But looking into his honest eyes, feeling the peace that settled over me whenever we were alone together, I knew Jessica was wrong. This was not settling. This was choosing love over appearances, substance over status, and genuine happiness over other people's expectations. The climactic moment came as Jessica prepared to leave. She cornered me by the barn door, away from the crowd. "Heather, I love you, but I have to say this." She began, her voice taking on that tone she used when she thought she was being wise. "You are making a huge mistake. You could have any life you wanted, and you are choosing the most limiting option possible. In 5 years, when you are struggling to make ends meet and bored out of your mind, do not say I did not warn you." She hugged me briefly, then click-clacked her way to Brad's BMW, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive perfume and the bitter taste of her words. As I watched their taillights disappear down the gravel road, I had no idea that Jessica's confidence in her superior life choices was about to become the foundation for the most devastating lesson in humility our family had ever experienced. 1 year later, Jessica and Brad's wedding made the society pages of the Columbus Dispatch. The photographs showed a ceremony that looked like something from a luxury travel magazine. Jessica, resplendent in a $10,000 gown, posed on pristine Bahamian beaches, while Brad, crisp in his designer tuxedo, gazed at her with practiced adoration. The wedding weekend cost more than Cole and I spent on our entire first year of marriage, but Jessica made sure everyone knew it. She created a special Instagram account dedicated to their destination celebration, posting dozens of photos with captions that dripped with obvious superiority. When you marry the right person, magic happens. Read one caption beneath a photo of their oceanfront suite. "So grateful for a husband who values quality and refuses to settle for ordinary." The subtle digs at my own simple ceremony were impossible to miss. But Jessica was just getting started. Within months, Brad's investment firm experienced what he called unprecedented growth. He landed several high-profile clients, and his commissions allowed them to purchase a massive house in New Albany, one of Columbus's most exclusive suburbs. The house was Jessica's crown jewel, a 6,000-square-foot colonial, with a circular driveway, professional landscaping, and enough marble to supply a small museum. She hosted a housewarming party that felt more like a real estate showcase, complete with catered appetizers and a photographer to document the event. "I just want everyone to see what is possible when you make smart choices," Jessica told our cousin Emma, who dutifully filmed a house tour for social media. "This is what happens when you marry someone with ambition and business sense instead of settling for small-town limitations." During our family Christmas celebration, Jessica arrived laden with gifts that looked like they had been professionally wrapped. She presented Mom with a cashmere scarf from Nordstrom, gave Dad a bottle of whiskey that cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week, and handed me a skincare set from some exclusive brand I had never heard of. My own gifts felt embarrassingly humble by comparison. I had made homemade preserves from the vegetables Cole and I grew, created photo albums from our first year of marriage, and knitted scarves in everyone's favorite colors. Jessica accepted my offerings with a smile that barely concealed her pity. "Oh, how sweet," she cooed, examining the jar of strawberry jam I had made. "Homemade. How very domestic of you, Heather." The word domestic dripped with condescension as if I had chosen the most pathetic possible hobby. Brad spent Christmas dinner regaling us with stories of his latest business triumphs. He talked about investment portfolios, market analysis, and financial strategies with the confidence of someone who believed his success validated his superiority. "Agriculture is such a risky business," he said to Cole, cutting into his prime rib with deliberate precision. "All those variables you cannot control: weather, commodity prices, government regulations. I could never handle that kind of uncertainty. Give me the stock market any day. At least there you can use knowledge and skill to manage risk." Cole nodded politely, asking thoughtful questions about Brad's work without defending his own choices. His humility in the face of such obvious condescension made me love him more, but it also made me angrier at my family's inability to see his worth. Jessica used every family gathering as an opportunity to showcase their escalating success. She started inviting my childhood friends to exclusive events, gradually pulling them into her orbit of wealth and glamour. Sarah, who had been my maid of honor, began posting photos from Jessica's dinner parties and shopping excursions. Lisa, my college roommate, started asking Jessica for fashion advice and career networking opportunities. I watched my own social circle shrink as Jessica's expanded. It hurt more than I cared to admit. These were relationships I had nurtured for years, friendships built on shared history and genuine affection. But Jessica's world of expensive restaurants, designer clothing, and sophisticated cultural events offered something I could not compete with. "I do not understand why you are being so sensitive," Jessica said when I finally confronted her about stealing my friends. "I am just including them in my social activities. If they prefer spending time with Brad and me, maybe that should tell you something about the lifestyle you have chosen." Her cruelty was becoming more refined, more calculated. She had learned to wound with precision, using other people's choices to validate her own superiority. Meanwhile, Cole and I were building our own version of success, though it looked nothing like Jessica's Instagram-worthy lifestyle. Our first growing season had been challenging but rewarding. Cole's corn and soybean yields exceeded expectations, and his reputation among local farmers grew as word spread about his innovative techniques and careful land management. I started selling vegetables at the Millbrook Farmers Market every Saturday, building relationships with customers who appreciated locally grown produce. The work was hard, starting before dawn to harvest and prepare for market, but I loved the direct connection with people who valued what we grew. Jessica, however, saw only the surface elements of our life. "Heather is literally selling vegetables from a card table," she told our mother during one of their weekly phone calls, not bothering to lower her voice when I visited. "I cannot believe my college-educated sister has become a produce vendor. It is so embarrassing." But Jessica's most devastating blow came during our parents' anniversary celebration. As the family gathered for dinner at their favorite restaurant, Jessica stood to make a toast that left everyone stunned. "I want to thank Mom and Dad for teaching us that we can achieve anything we set our minds to," she began, her voice carrying across the dining room. "They showed us that education opens doors and hard work pays off. Brad and I are so grateful for those lessons as we build our own success." She paused, looking directly at me. "Of course, not everyone interprets those lessons the same way, but I truly believe that following your dreams, even when they lead to unexpected places, takes courage too." The backhanded compliment hit its target perfectly. She had managed to praise herself while simultaneously painting me as someone whose dreams were disappointingly small. As if to punctuate her point, Jessica announced their latest acquisition. "Brad and I just purchased a vacation home in Destin, Florida. We are thinking of making it our winter retreat. Brad says successful people need to diversify their investments, and real estate in coastal areas is always a smart choice." The table erupted in congratulations and excited questions about their new property. Jessica basked in the attention, describing ocean views and private beaches with the casual air of someone for whom luxury had become routine. I watched my parents' faces light up with pride and felt something cold settle in my stomach. They were genuinely impressed by Jessica's achievements, truly proud of her success. When they looked at me, I saw polite interest, but nothing approaching the same level of enthusiasm. The evening's final twist came as we prepared to leave. Brad approached Cole with what appeared to be a generous offer. "Cole, I have been thinking about our conversation regarding agricultural investments." Brad said, his tone suggesting he was about to confer a tremendous favor. "I would be willing to consider adding some farmland to my portfolio. If you ever want to discuss selling or perhaps partnering with someone who understands financial growth, I would be happy to explore options with you." Cole thanked him politely, but declined, explaining that he was committed to keeping his family's land in agricultural use. Brad smiled with the patience of someone humoring a child. "Well, the offer stands," Brad said. "Sometimes it takes time to see the bigger picture." As we drove home that night, I felt smaller than I had since high school. Jessica and Brad's success seemed to cast a shadow over everything Cole and I were building. Their confident trajectory toward greater wealth and status made our quiet contentment feel like failure. "Do you think they are right?" I asked Cole as we pulled into our driveway. "Do you think we are missing opportunities?" Cole turned off the engine and sat quietly for a moment, looking out at the fields that surrounded our home. "Heather, there are many different ways to measure success," he finally said. "Brad measures it in dollars and possessions. Jessica measures it in social status and other people's envy. But I measure it in the health of this soil, the satisfaction of work well done, and the peace I feel every morning when I wake up beside the woman I love." His words should have comforted me, but Jessica's poison was already working its way through my system. As I lay in bed that night, I could not stop comparing our simple farmhouse to their marble mansion, our farmer's market stand to their vacation home, our quiet contentment to their obvious triumph. I had no idea that Jessica and Brad's house of cards was already beginning to wobble, or that their apparent success was built on foundations far less stable than the rich Ohio soil beneath our feet. 18 months into their marriage, I began noticing subtle changes in Jessica's behavior that contradicted her continued boasting about their charmed life. The first hint came during a family barbecue at our parents' house in late spring. Jessica arrived wearing what appeared to be another expensive outfit, but something seemed different. Her designer handbag, which she normally displayed like a trophy, remained firmly clutched against her side. When Mom complimented her jewelry, Jessica's fingers automatically went to her earrings in a gesture that seemed more protective than proud. "Oh, these old things," she said with a laugh that sounded forced. "I have had them forever." But I remembered those earrings. She had posted a photo of them on Instagram just 6 months earlier, captioned with excitement about Brad's spontaneous romantic surprise. They were diamond studs that had cost enough to feed a family of 4 for several months. During dinner, I watched Brad more carefully than usual. He drank 3 beers before the meal even started, then switched to the whiskey Dad offered, consuming it at a pace that seemed designed to numb rather than enjoy. His usual confident chatter about investment strategies was replaced by vague references to market volatility and temporary adjustments. "The financial sector is going through an interesting period right now," Brad said when Dad asked about his work. "Lots of regulatory changes, new compliance requirements. It is keeping everyone on their toes." His explanation sounded rehearsed, like a speech he had practiced for situations exactly like this one. Jessica compensated for Brad's subdued mood by becoming even more aggressively cheerful than usual. She dominated conversations, steering them toward topics that allowed her to showcase their lifestyle, but even her bragging had a desperate edge that had not been there before. "We are thinking about redecorating the master bedroom," she announced during dessert. "I found the most amazing interior designer who works exclusively with New Albany clients. She is booked solid, but Brad knows someone who can get us moved to the front of her waiting list." Cole and I exchanged glances. Jessica had redecorated that same bedroom only 8 months earlier, posting dozens of photos of the process across multiple social media platforms. The real crack in her facade appeared when she excused herself to take a phone call. Through the kitchen window, I watched her pace across the backyard, her voice rising to levels that suggested she was arguing rather than chatting. Her free hand gestured frantically as she spoke, and her expression looked nothing like the serene confidence she usually projected. When she returned, her smile seemed painted on. "Sorry about that," she said brightly. "Just some confusion about our credit card statement. You know how these customer service departments can be." But customer service representatives do not usually make people cry, and I had definitely seen tears in Jessica's eyes before she wiped them away. Over the following weeks, I started paying closer attention to Jessica's social media presence. The constant stream of luxury purchases and exclusive experiences continued, but something felt different. Her captions became longer, more defensive, as if she was trying to convince herself as much as her followers. "Some people think success means settling for ordinary," she wrote beneath a photo of their dining room. "Brad and I believe in investing in quality and creating the life we deserve. So grateful for a husband who refuses to accept mediocrity." The tone had shifted from casual bragging to something that felt more like ammunition in an invisible battle. Then came the incident that confirmed my suspicions. I was shopping at the upscale mall in Columbus, picking up a birthday gift for our cousin, when I spotted Jessica at the jewelry counter in Nordstrom. She was not browsing or making a purchase. Instead, she stood with her back to the main walkway, engaged in what appeared to be an intense negotiation with a sales associate. I moved closer, pretending to examine handbags at a nearby display, and caught fragments of their conversation. "I realize the return policy usually requires the original receipt," Jessica was saying, her voice tight with stress. "But I purchased these here less than 6 months ago. Surely your system can track the transaction." The sales associate, a middle-aged woman with practiced patience, spoke in the gentle tone reserved for delivering bad news. "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but without proof of purchase, I cannot authorize a return. Perhaps if you could contact your credit card company for a statement showing the original transaction." Jessica's shoulders sagged. "The credit card account is closed," she said quietly. "There was some kind of mix-up with the company." She gathered the jewelry box from the counter with careful dignity, as if accepting this defeat was simply a temporary inconvenience. But her hands shook slightly as she placed the items in her purse. I ducked behind a clothing rack to avoid being seen as she walked past, but not before I caught a glimpse of her face. The expression I saw there was nothing like the confident woman who dominated our family gatherings. This was someone who looked scared, desperate, and completely out of options. That evening, I called Jessica on the pretense of discussing Mom's upcoming birthday celebration. During our conversation, I carefully probed about her life. "How are things going with Brad's work?" I asked casually. "He seemed a little stressed at the barbecue." "Oh, you know how it is," Jessica replied, her voice immediately brightening into that artificial tone she used when performing happiness. "The investment industry is so demanding. Brad is working on some major deals that require a lot of attention. Success does not come without sacrifice." But her explanation felt hollow, recited rather than lived. Meanwhile, Cole and I were experiencing our own kind of success that looked nothing like Jessica's version. Our vegetable operation had expanded beyond the farmer's market to include a small restaurant account and a growing number of customers who drove directly to our farm for fresh produce. Cole had also begun implementing regenerative farming practices that were improving soil health and increasing crop yields. His reputation among local farmers continued to grow, and several agricultural extension agents had started visiting our operation to observe his techniques. The irony was not lost on me that while Jessica's apparent wealth was creating stress and anxiety, our simple lifestyle was generating genuine contentment and gradual prosperity. But Jessica's response to our modest success was to become even more vicious in her criticism. "I heard Heather is selling vegetables out of her barn now," she said to Mom during one of their phone calls, speaking loudly enough for me to overhear during a family visit. "I mean, I suppose everyone has to find their level, but it is so embarrassing to tell people my sister runs a roadside produce stand." Her cruelty had evolved from casual condescension to deliberate malice. She seemed to need my failure to validate her own choices, and my contentment threatened the narrative she was building about our family's hierarchy. The final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Cole's banker Jim Patterson was also a member of our church and occasionally shared financial insights about the local economy. During a casual conversation after Sunday service, Jim mentioned regulatory troubles affecting investment firms in Columbus. "There have been several federal investigations into questionable practices," he said quietly. "Some firms were promising returns that were mathematically impossible using new investors' money to pay earlier clients. Classic Ponzi scheme structure. The authorities are cracking down hard." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you know which firms are involved?" Jim shook his head. "I cannot share specific details, but I would advise anyone with investments in Columbus-based firms to ask detailed questions about their fund management practices. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is." That night, I lay awake thinking about Brad's increasingly evasive answers regarding his work, Jessica's desperate attempts to return expensive jewelry, and the growing desperation beneath her aggressive confidence. I still had no idea how dramatically their house of cards was about to collapse, or that their fall would create a crisis that would test every assumption my family held about success, loyalty, and the true meaning of wealth. But I was beginning to understand that Jessica's mockery of my choices was actually fear. She had built her identity on a foundation of appearances and borrowed money, and somewhere deep inside she was starting to realize how precarious that foundation really was. The collapse came on a Tuesday morning in early October, swift and devastating as a natural disaster. I was in the kitchen preparing vegetables for market when my phone rang. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, but the voice that came through sounded nothing like my confident, condescending sister. "Heather." She sobbed, her words barely comprehensible through her tears. "Something terrible is happening. There are FBI agents at Brad's office. They have blocked off the entire building and nobody can get inside." My hands went cold. "Jessica, slow down. What are you talking about?" "Federal agents," she gasped. "They raided Morrison Investment Group at 6 this morning. Brad called me from the parking lot, but then his phone went dead. I have been trying to reach him for hours, but it goes straight to voicemail." I sank into a chair, the implications hitting me like physical blows. "Where are you now?" "Sitting in my car outside his office building," she said, her voice breaking completely. "There are news vans everywhere. Reporters are trying to ask me questions, but I do not know anything. I do not understand what is happening." Over the next several hours, the story unfolded with horrifying clarity. Morrison Investment Group had been operating an elaborate Ponzi scheme that had defrauded clients of over $12 million. Brad had been using money from new investors to pay artificially high returns to earlier clients while skimming enormous commissions for himself and his partners. The local news coverage was relentless and damaging. Video footage showed federal agents carrying boxes of evidence from Brad's office, while reporters described the scope of the fraud. Many victims were retirees who had trusted Brad with their entire life savings. Bradley Morrison and his associates allegedly promised returns of 15 to 20% annually, the news anchor explained. These unrealistic guarantees should have been red flags for potential investors. Instead, Morrison used his charm and apparent success to convince victims that he had discovered some kind of financial secret. Jessica called again that evening, her voice hollow with shock. "Brad came home an hour ago," she said quietly. "His lawyer told him not to speak to anyone, including me. He is sitting in our living room staring at the wall like a zombie. Heather, I think our accounts are frozen. I tried to use our credit card at the grocery store and it was declined." The next 3 days brought a cascade of devastating revelations. Federal investigators had seized all assets connected to Morrison Investment Group, including Brad and Jessica's personal accounts. Their mortgage company, discovering that their income source was under criminal investigation, began foreclosure proceedings on both their primary residence and their Florida vacation home. Jessica's social media went completely dark. The carefully curated Instagram account that had documented their luxurious lifestyle simply stopped posting. Friends who had celebrated their success began distancing themselves, and Jessica found herself completely isolated in the mansion that was no longer theirs. I drove to Columbus to check on her, finding a woman I barely recognized. The confident, condescending sister I had known was gone, replaced by someone who looked hollow and desperate. She answered the door in sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, her hair unwashed and her face bare of the elaborate makeup she usually wore. "The bank called this morning," she said without preamble. "We have 30 days to vacate. The Florida house is already gone. They are auctioning off everything inside both properties to pay creditors." I followed her through the marble foyer that had once been her pride and joy. Most of their expensive furniture was already marked with small tags, apparently catalogued by court-appointed assessors. The house felt like a museum of a life that had never really existed. "Where is Brad?" I asked. Jessica laughed bitterly. "He disappeared 3 days ago. Just left a note saying he needed time to think. His phone is disconnected and his lawyer says he does not know where Brad went. I think he emptied whatever hidden accounts we had left and ran." As if the situation could not get worse, Jessica delivered the final devastating blow. "Heather, I am pregnant," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I found out yesterday. I am 8 weeks along." I felt my heart break for her. Regardless of all the pain she had caused me, seeing her so completely destroyed was agonizing. She was going to have a baby in the middle of this financial and legal catastrophe, and she was facing it completely alone. "Have you told Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Not yet," she said, starting to cry again. "I cannot bear to see their faces when they realize what a failure I have become. They were so proud of Brad and me. They bragged about our success to everyone at church. Now they are going to have to explain that their daughter married a criminal and that their grandchild will be born to a woman with no money, no home, and no prospects." The local news continued to dig deeper into the scandal, revealing the extent to which Brad had fabricated his success. The expensive cars were leased, their lifestyle maintained entirely through credit and stolen money. Even their wedding in the Bahamas had been paid for with funds that belonged to other people. Former clients began speaking to reporters, describing how Brad had convinced them to invest their retirement savings, their children's college funds, and their emergency reserves. Elderly couples who had trusted him now faced financial ruin in their final years. Jessica was forced to move back to our parents' house in shame, bringing only a few suitcases of clothing and personal items. Everything else was being liquidated to compensate Brad's victims. The designer handbags, expensive jewelry, and luxury furniture that had defined her identity for 2 years simply vanished. Our parents tried to be supportive, but their shock and embarrassment were obvious. Dad, who had bragged about his successful son-in-law to his coworkers, now had to explain that Brad was a federal fugitive. Mom, who had proudly shown Jessica's Instagram posts to her bridge club, suddenly stopped talking about her daughters altogether. The most devastating moment came when Jessica learned the full extent of Brad's betrayal. His lawyer contacted her to explain that Brad had cleaned out their remaining accounts before disappearing, leaving her with literally nothing. He had also been having an affair with a woman who worked at a competing investment firm, someone who had apparently helped him hide assets that should have gone to victim compensation. He left me a voicemail, Jessica told me one afternoon as we sat in our parents' backyard. Just one message recorded from some airport. He said he was sorry, but that he had to think about his own future. He said the baby was not his responsibility, since he never wanted children anyway. She played the message for me, and I listened to Brad's familiar voice delivering this crushing blow with the same calm confidence he had once used to sell fraudulent investments. "Jessica, I know this is hard, but you have to understand that staying would not help anyone. The legal situation is too complicated and I need to explore options for rebuilding somewhere else. Take care of yourself." No mention of love, no acknowledgement of their marriage or her pregnancy, just cold calculation and complete abandonment. That night, Jessica had what appeared to be a complete breakdown. I found her in her childhood bedroom surrounded by photo albums and mementos from the past 2 years. She was systematically destroying every image and memory of her life, with Brad tearing apart wedding photos and throwing away gifts he had given her. "I cannot believe how stupid I was," she said through her tears. "All those times I criticized your choices and I was living a complete lie. At least you and Cole built something real. Everything I had was stolen from other people." Her humility was genuine but painful to witness. The sister who had spent years mocking my life was finally seeing the truth, but the lesson was costing her everything she thought she valued. The final twist in this chapter came when divorce papers arrived at our parents' house. Brad was filing for divorce from somewhere in South America, claiming that Jessica had been aware of his illegal activities and therefore bore partial responsibility for the fraud. It was a vicious lie designed to protect him from extradition and limit his legal exposure. But it meant that Jessica, already facing financial ruin and single motherhood, would now have to defend herself against federal investigators who might believe Brad's claims. As I watched my sister's world disintegrate completely, I realized that everything she had mocked about my life, Cole's quiet strength, our simple contentment, our solid foundation, was about to become exactly what she needed to survive. But first, our family would have to navigate the crisis that was still coming when our parents would demand that I sacrifice everything Cole and I had built to rescue Jessica from consequences that were entirely of her own making. 3 weeks after Brad's disappearance, my parents called a family meeting that would forever change our relationships. Mom's voice on the phone carried an urgency I had never heard before, tinged with desperation and barely controlled panic. "We need to discuss Jessica's situation as a family," she said simply. "Can you and Cole be here tomorrow evening after dinner? This cannot wait any longer." I arrived at my childhood home to find an atmosphere thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Jessica sat hunched on the sofa where she had once lounged like a queen, her face puffy from crying and her hands protectively cradling her still small belly. Mom and Dad occupied their usual chairs, but their posture suggested they were preparing for battle rather than conversation. Cole settled quietly beside me, his presence immediately calming despite the electric hostility filling the room. He had insisted on coming, despite my offer to handle this alone, sensing that whatever my parents had planned would require united resistance. Dad cleared his throat and launched into what was obviously a prepared speech. "We have been discussing Jessica's situation extensively." He began, his voice carrying the authority he had used when disciplining us as children. "As a family, we have a Christian obligation to support each other during times of crisis. Jessica is pregnant and homeless, facing potential criminal charges through no fault of her own." I felt Cole tense beside me. The phrase, "no fault of her own," was such a blatant distortion of reality that it bordered on deliberate blindness. Mom picked up the narrative with the smooth coordination of a planned presentation. "Jessica cannot work in her condition, and she cannot afford legal representation. The public defender assigned to her case is overwhelmed and inexperienced. She needs a real attorney, someone who can protect her and the baby from Brad's lies." "We understand that this is a difficult situation," Dad continued, "but families stick together. We cannot abandon Jessica and our grandchild because of one man's criminal behavior." Jessica finally spoke, her voice small but laden with familiar manipulation. "I know I have not always been supportive of your choices, Heather. I said things that were mean and unfair. But I am begging you to help me now. This baby is innocent and I have nowhere else to turn." The room fell silent as they waited for my response. I looked around at these people who had shaped my entire life, searching for any sign that they understood what they were asking. "What exactly do you want me to do?" I asked carefully. Dad pulled out a folder thick with papers, his expression businesslike and determined. "We have researched Jessica's legal and financial needs. A proper criminal defense attorney will cost approximately $75,000. Living expenses for Jessica and the baby for the next year will require another $50,000. Medical bills, therapy, and other necessities will add at least $25,000 more." The numbers hung in the air like accusations. $150,000. More money than Cole and I had ever seen in our bank account at one time. Mom's voice became gentle, almost pleading. We know you and Cole have been successful with the farming operation. Land values in your area have increased significantly. A small portion of your property could be sold to generate the funds Jessica needs. My blood ran cold. They were not asking for money we had. They were asking us to sell Cole's family land, the foundation of everything we had built together. We have already contacted a real estate agent, Dad said, producing another set of papers. Jim Wilson has appraised your southern 40 acres at approximately $200,000. The sale would easily cover Jessica's needs with money left over for your own financial security. Cole spoke for the first time, his voice calm, but carrying an undercurrent of steel. That land has been in my family for 3 generations. It is not for sale. Dad's expression hardened. Cole, I understand your attachment to the property, but this is about family loyalty and Christian duty. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love. Jessica made her choices, Cole replied quietly. She chose to mock our lifestyle, ridicule our values, and build her entire identity on money that belonged to other people. Those were her decisions, and she needs to face the consequences. Mom gasped as if Cole had struck her. How can you be so heartless? Jessica is carrying our grandchild. Are you willing to let an innocent baby suffer because of pride? The attack shifted to me, coordinated and relentless. Heather, you have always been the responsible one. Mom said, tears beginning to flow. We have raised you to be generous and forgiving. Jessica made mistakes, but she is your sister. Do you really want to watch her go to prison while you sit on valuable land that could save her life? Extended family members had apparently been recruited for this intervention. My phone buzzed with text messages from aunts and cousins, all expressing support for Jessica and disappointment in my selfishness. The messages felt orchestrated, as if my parents had contacted everyone to pressure me into compliance. Aunt Patricia thinks you should definitely help Jessica, Mom said, reading from her own phone. She says land can be replaced, but family relationships are forever. Cousin Mike says that successful people have a responsibility to lift up family members who are struggling, Dad added. He cannot understand why you would choose money over your sister's well-being. Jessica played her final card, using her pregnancy like a weapon. Heather, I can feel the baby moving now, she said, placing both hands on her stomach. Every time I get scared about the future, the baby kicks like it can sense my anxiety. Do you want your nephew to be born in prison because his mother could not afford proper legal representation? The emotional manipulation was masterful and brutal. They had crafted a narrative in which I was the villain, selfishly hoarding resources while my pregnant sister faced destruction. Any refusal on my part would be painted as heartless greed. Religious pressure was added to the family guilt. Pastor Williams agrees that Christian families should make financial sacrifices to protect vulnerable members, Mom said. He specifically mentioned that those blessed with resources have an obligation to share them during times of crisis. I felt completely surrounded, attacked from every direction by people who claimed to love me but were demanding that I sacrifice everything Cole and I had built. The most painful part was realizing that my parents had never truly respected our life choices. They saw our farm as a convenient bank account rather than a cherished way of life. But the climactic moment came when Dad revealed the depth of their planning and pressure. We have prepared all the necessary paperwork, he said, spreading documents across the coffee table. The real estate contract, the attorney-retainer agreement, and the financial power of attorney that will allow us to handle the sale efficiently. Cole and I stared at papers that would legally transfer control of his family's land to people who viewed it as nothing more than a commodity. They had moved far beyond requesting help. They were demanding surrender. All we need is your signature, Dad said, offering me a pen. Once these papers are filed, Jessica's problems will be solved, and our family can begin healing from this crisis. The room filled with expectant silence. 3 generations of my family watched me, waiting for me to sign away Cole's heritage to rescue Jessica from consequences she had brought entirely upon herself. I looked at my husband, this quiet man, who had endured years of condescension and mockery from these people, who had never once raised his voice or responded to their cruelty with anything but patient dignity. His calm brown eyes met mine, and I saw no pressure there, no expectation that I choose his interests over my family's demands. "The decision is yours, Heather," he said quietly. "Whatever you choose, I will support." But I also saw something else in his expression. I saw the accumulated pain of years spent being dismissed and undervalued by people who should have welcomed him as a son. I saw the quiet resignation of someone who expected to be sacrificed for the greater good. That was the moment I realized that this crisis was not really about money or land, or even Jessica's pregnancy. It was about respect, dignity, and the question of whether my family would ever truly accept the man I had chosen and the life we had built together. As I reached for the pen, Cole spoke one more time, his voice carrying a quiet authority that finally commanded the room's complete attention. "Before Heather signs anything, there is something you all need to understand about the land you are asking her to sell." What happened next would shatter every assumption my family held about success, wealth, and the true meaning of power in our small Ohio farming community. Cole's quiet words cut through the family's pressure like a blade through silk. The room fell into complete silence, every eye fixed on this man they had dismissed and undervalued for years. For the first time in our relationship, I watched my husband command absolute attention without raising his voice or changing his gentle demeanor. "Mom, Dad." I began, my voice shaking with accumulated rage and heartbreak. "Before we continue this discussion, you need to understand what you are actually asking me to do." Tears streamed down my face as years of suppressed hurt finally found their voice. "You want me to sign papers that will destroy the life Cole and I have built together. You want me to betray the man who has loved me unconditionally, who has endured your condescension and Jessica's cruelty for years without ever fighting back or defending himself." I wiped my eyes, but continued speaking, my voice growing stronger. "You think our farm is just a convenient source of money to solve problems created by Jessica's greed and vanity. You have never respected our choices, never valued what we have accomplished, never seen Cole as anything more than an obstacle to your daughter's success." Jessica started to protest, but I held up my hand. "You spent 2 years mocking my husband and my marriage. You called him a simple farmer, suggested he was beneath me, and treated our home like it was some kind of failure. You stole my friends, criticized my lifestyle, and made me feel ashamed of choosing love over status." My parents looked uncomfortable, but not yet understanding the full magnitude of their mistake. "And now," I continued, "when your golden couple's life falls apart, when your perfect son-in-law turns out to be a criminal who steals from elderly people and abandons his pregnant wife, suddenly you want us to sacrifice everything to clean up the mess." Cole reached for the folder of documents they had prepared, studying the real estate contract with careful attention. "You have had this land appraised at $200,000, he said calmly. Dad nodded, apparently relieved to return to practical matters. "Jim Wilson is the most reputable agent in the county. His assessment was very thorough." Cole smiled for the first time that evening, an expression that carried no warmth. "Jim Wilson appraised the surface rights to 40 acres of farmland. What he did not appraise, because you did not tell him the complete situation, is the actual ownership structure of this property." Something in Cole's tone made everyone lean forward. Mom and Dad exchanged confused glances while Jessica watched with growing apprehension. "You see," Cole continued, his voice remaining gentle despite the bombshell he was about to drop, "when my grandfather died 5 years ago, he did not simply leave me his farm. He made me the executor and primary beneficiary of the Thompson Family Agricultural Trust." He pulled out his phone and opened a document that he placed on the coffee table where everyone could see it. "This trust owns not just the 40 acres you want to sell, but over 8,000 acres throughout this county and 2 adjacent counties." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my family's faces as the implications slowly registered. 8,000 acres, Cole repeated, letting the number settle. "At current market values, the trust's holdings are worth approximately $42 million. Jessica's face went white as paper. Mom gasped audibly. Dad stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. Furthermore, Cole continued, his calm voice the only sound in the room. The trust owns mineral rights, development rights, and water rights across much of southern Ohio. It controls the majority of farmable land in this region, making it one of the most significant agricultural holdings in the state. I watched Jessica's expression transform as she realized the magnitude of what she had spent years mocking. This man she had dismissed as a lowly farmer was actually one of the wealthiest landowners in Ohio. "But how?" Dad stammered. "How did we not know this?" Cole's smile became genuinely amused. "Because I have never wanted people to know. My grandfather structured the trust specifically to avoid publicity and family drama. He had seen too many families destroyed by fighting over money and land." He showed us another document, this one bearing the official seal of the Ohio Secretary of State's office. The Thompson Agricultural Trust is managed by a board of directors that includes agricultural economists from Ohio State University, soil conservation specialists, and sustainable farming advocates. Its mission is to preserve farmland, promote regenerative agriculture, and provide educational opportunities for future farmers. Mom's voice came out as barely a whisper. "You mean you have been wealthy this entire time?" "Wealthy in the sense that I control significant assets, yes," Cole replied. "But those assets come with enormous responsibilities. The trust supports dozens of farming families, funds agricultural research, and provides college scholarships for rural students. It is not personal wealth that I can spend on luxury cars and vacation homes." Jessica finally found her voice, though it sounded hollow and broken. "All those times I called you a simple farmer, all those jokes about marrying beneath me, you were actually someone who chose humility over showing off," Cole finished gently. "Someone who preferred quiet service to flashy displays of wealth. Someone who measured success by soil health and community support rather than by bank account balances." He turned his attention back to my parents, his tone becoming more serious. "You want to know why I never told you this? Because I wanted to see who you really were. I wanted to understand whether you would respect me for my character or only for my money." Dad's face was red with embarrassment and dawning realization. "Cole, we had no idea." "No," Cole interrupted, still speaking softly but with unmistakable authority. "You had every opportunity to see my character, my work ethic, and my love for your daughter. Instead, you chose to judge me based on appearances and assumptions." He gathered the real estate documents they had prepared and placed them in a neat stack. "Now you want me to sell land that supports multiple farming families to bail Jessica out of consequences she created through her own choices. You want me to liquidate assets that fund college scholarships for deserving young people so Jessica can afford an expensive lawyer to help her escape responsibility for marrying a criminal." The words hung in the air like physical blows. I watched my family struggle to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they understood about power dynamics in our relationships. But Cole was not finished. He pulled out one more document, this one thick with legal language and official stamps. "Since you are interested in my financial capabilities," he said, "you should know that the Thompson Agricultural Trust has been preparing to announce a major philanthropic initiative. We are planning to donate $5 million over the next 5 years to establish a sustainable farming education center at Ohio State University." Jessica made a sound that was part sob, part gasp of disbelief. "We are also funding a scholarship program for first-generation college students from rural families," Cole continued. "Heather has been working with me to design this program for the past year. The total commitment will be approximately $3 million over 10 years. I felt my own shock as Cole revealed plans we had discussed in general terms, but that I had not realized were so advanced and substantial. My husband had been quietly building a legacy that would impact thousands of lives. "In addition," Cole said, "we are partnering with the USDA to fund research into climate-resilient farming practices. That initiative will receive $2 million over 7 years." He looked around the room at my stunned family members. So when you ask me to sell 40 acres to raise money for Jessica's problems, you are asking me to liquidate assets that are committed to educating future farmers and supporting rural communities. The final twist came when Cole revealed the ultimate irony of their demands. Jessica's legal fees could easily be covered by the trust's discretionary fund, he said quietly. If she had asked for help with humility and genuine remorse, if she had acknowledged her mistakes and shown respect for the people she spent years attacking, assistance would have been possible. Jessica looked up sharply, hope flickering in her eyes. But Cole continued, his voice becoming steel beneath the gentleness. She cannot demand help while simultaneously claiming she was superior to the people she now expects to rescue her. She cannot mock our choices and then insist we sacrifice our values to solve her problems. He stood up, indicating that the conversation was over. The land is not for sale. The trust's mission is too important to be compromised by family drama. And Jessica needs to learn that her actions have consequences that money cannot always fix. As my family sat in stunned silence, processing the complete destruction of every assumption they had held about success and worth, I realized that Cole had just taught them the most valuable lesson they would ever receive about the difference between true wealth and empty appearances. But the story was not quite over. There was still the question of what would happen next, and whether my family could learn to build relationships based on character rather than net worth. 6 months later, I stood in the same living room where my family had tried to force me into sacrificing Cole's heritage, but everything had changed. The atmosphere was warm with genuine affection, rather than charged with manipulation and demands. Jessica sat in the rocking chair Cole had made for her nursing 3-month-old baby Thomas, her face glowing with the quiet contentment that comes from earning peace rather than demanding it. The transformation had not happened overnight, and it certainly had not been easy. After Cole's revelation about the trust, Jessica had experienced what could only be described as a complete psychological breakdown. The weight of realizing how wrong she had been about everything, combined with the stress of her legal situation and impending motherhood, sent her into a depression that required professional intervention. Brad was eventually arrested in Costa Rica and extradited to face federal fraud charges. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims, though most of the stolen money was never recovered. Jessica was cleared of all criminal charges when investigators determined she had been genuinely unaware of Brad's illegal activities. But clearing her legal name was easier than rebuilding her sense of self-worth. "I kept thinking about all those times I called you a simple farmer," Jessica said to Cole one afternoon as we sat on the porch watching Thomas sleep in his carrier. "I was so convinced that expensive things meant someone was successful, that big houses and fancy cars proved a person's worth." Cole rocked quietly in his chair. Thomas nestled against his chest with the complete trust that babies reserve for people who emanate genuine safety. "I spent 2 years mocking the most successful man I knew," Jessica continued, tears flowing down her cheeks. "I made fun of his wife, criticized their choices, and treated them like they were failures while I was living a complete lie built on stolen money." The humility in her voice was painful but genuine. This was not the performative remorse of someone seeking forgiveness to ease their own guilt. This was the deep acknowledgement of someone who had finally seen the truth about themselves and was committed to becoming better. "Jessica," Cole said gently, "what matters now is what you do with that understanding." And Jessica had done something remarkable with it. Instead of wallowing in self-pity or expecting immediate forgiveness, she had quietly begun the hard work of earning redemption. She took a job at Morrison's General Store, working 40 hours a week, stocking shelves, running the register, and helping elderly customers carry groceries to their cars. The work was humble, honest, and exactly what she needed to rebuild her character from the ground up. "Every day I meet people whose retirement money Brad stole," she told me during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Mrs. Henderson comes in twice a week and always counts her change carefully because she is living on Social Security now, instead of the pension Brad convinced her to invest with him. She does not know who I am, but I know who she is, and I see every day what my husband's crimes cost real people. The baby had arrived healthy and beautiful, with Jessica facing labor and delivery, supported by family who were learning to offer love without conditions. Cole and I had been in the delivery room when Thomas took his first breath, and watching Cole hold his nephew with tears in his eyes was one of the most moving moments of my life. Our parents had undergone their own transformation, forced to confront their prejudices and misplaced values. Dad, who had spent years dismissing Cole as unsuccessful, now sought his advice on everything from investment strategies to community service. Mom, who had enabled Jessica's arrogance, began volunteering at the food bank and discovered satisfaction in serving others rather than impressing them. "We failed you both," Mom said during a family dinner celebrating Thomas's baptism. "We taught Jessica that appearances mattered more than character, and we taught Heather that her family would only value her if she lived up to our shallow expectations." The apology was long overdue but deeply appreciated. Cole had indeed used the trust's resources to help Jessica, but not in the way our parents had originally demanded. Instead of paying for expensive lawyers to help her escape consequences, he funded parenting classes, financial literacy education, and counseling to help her build a stable foundation for raising Thomas. True help, Cole explained, means giving people the tools they need to succeed, not removing the obstacles that teach them important lessons. Jessica was living in a modest apartment in town, furnished with simple but comfortable pieces that Cole and I had helped her select. She had learned to budget, carefully cook nutritious meals, and find joy in small pleasures that cost nothing. The contrast with her previous lifestyle was dramatic, but her happiness seemed far more genuine than anything she had experienced during her years of artificial luxury. The most beautiful change was in her relationship with Thomas. Jessica had approached motherhood with the same intensity she had once applied to social media presentations, determined to be perfect in this role, since she had failed so spectacularly in her previous one. But Cole had gently guided her toward a more natural approach. "Babies do not need perfect mothers," he told her one afternoon when she was stressed about following every piece of parenting advice she had read. "They need mothers who love them consistently and authentically. Thomas does not care whether his clothes are designer brands or second-hand finds. He cares whether you respond when he cries and smile when he looks at you." Under Cole's patient mentoring, Jessica learned to trust her instincts and find confidence in simple competence rather than expensive accessories. The Thompson Agricultural Trust had indeed announced its major philanthropic initiatives, with Jessica volunteering to help coordinate the scholarship program. Her experience with social media and event planning, previously used for shallow self-promotion, now served a purpose that honored the farming families the trust supported. "I understand now why you kept the trust private," Jessica said to Cole during our most recent family gathering. "When people know you have money, they stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a potential solution to their problems. You wanted people to respect you for who you are, not what you own." My own relationship with Jessica had healed slowly but completely. The sister who had spent years trying to make me feel small had been replaced by someone who genuinely admired the choices Cole and I had made. She often brought Thomas to the farm where he played in the garden while Jessica helped with harvest or canning. "Watching you and Cole work together taught me what marriage is supposed to look like," she told me one afternoon as we prepared vegetables for the farmer's market. "You built something real together. Brad and I just performed success for other people while our actual relationship was completely hollow." The farmer's market had become Jessica's favorite Saturday activity. She loved watching customers discover the quality of our organic vegetables, and she had begun helping me develop a line of preserves and pickled vegetables that were becoming popular throughout the county. "There is something satisfying about creating something useful with your own hands," she said, admiring a jar of strawberry jam she had helped make. "When people buy this, they are getting something I actually made, not just something I bought with borrowed money to impress them." Thomas was thriving in this environment of honest work and genuine relationships. At 3 months old, he had already been blessed by more authentic love than Jessica had experienced in her entire adult life before his birth. Cole had proven to be an extraordinary uncle, teaching Thomas about soil and plants during long walks through the fields, singing farming songs in his gentle voice, and demonstrating the patient consistency that made him such an excellent mentor for Jessica as well. I want Thomas to grow up understanding that wealth means having enough to share, not having more than everyone else, Jessica said as she watched Cole carry her son through the tomato rows. I want him to measure success by how much good he does in the world, not by how much stuff he accumulates. The final healing came during Thomas's baptism, when Jessica stood before our church family and spoke about redemption, humility, and the grace that allows people to start over. I spent years believing that success meant being envied by other people, she said, her voice strong and clear. I thought I was superior because I had expensive things and exclusive experiences. But real success means building relationships based on love and respect, contributing to your community, and raising children who understand the difference between needs and wants. She looked directly at Cole and me as she continued. My sister and her husband showed me what true wealth looks like. They have enough money to live comfortably, enough love to support their family, enough wisdom to make good choices, and enough generosity to help others grow. That is the definition of success I want my son to learn. As our extended family celebrated Thomas's baptism that afternoon, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this place of genuine peace and restored relationships. Jessica's fall from artificial grace had been painful but necessary. Our family's crisis had revealed ugly truths about our values and priorities, but it had also created an opportunity for real growth and authentic connection. Cole's quiet strength and patient wisdom had guided us all through the storm. His refusal to be drawn into family drama while maintaining his principles had eventually earned him the respect that was always his due. His example of using wealth responsibly and maintaining humility in the face of others' judgment had taught lessons that no amount of preaching could have accomplished. Now, as I watched my sister push her son's stroller through our farmer's market while proudly explaining our organic growing practices to curious customers, I realized that our story had ended exactly as it should have. Justice had been served not through punishment, but through transformation. Jessica had lost everything she thought mattered and discovered everything that actually did matter. Our family had learned that true wealth cannot be measured in bank accounts or possessions, but in the strength of relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. We had discovered that success means different things to different people, but authentic success always includes service to others and commitment to values that outlast temporary circumstances. Thomas would grow up surrounded by people who understood these lessons, guided by parents and extended family members who had learned to value character over cash, substance over status, and love over luxury. As I held my nephew and watched Cole teach Jessica how to prune tomato plants, I felt grateful for the crisis that had initially threatened to destroy our family. Without that painful testing, we might never have discovered the depths of love and strength that were always present, waiting to be revealed when surface pretenses were stripped away. The simple farmer my sister had once mocked had become the foundation upon which our entire family rebuilt their understanding of what really matters. And the woman who had learned to find joy in honest work and authentic relationships had become a mother worthy of raising the next generation with wisdom instead of vanity. Sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the opportunity to see ourselves clearly enough to choose becoming better. Jessica had received that gift, painful as it was, and she had used it wisely. Our family was stronger now, built on truth instead of appearances, and that was worth more than any amount of money could ever buy. What about you? Have you ever found yourself measuring success by other people's standards instead of your own values? Have you learned to see the difference between true wealth and temporary appearances? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family relationships, please hit the like button and consider subscribing for more stories about finding genuine happiness in authentic living. Share this with someone who might need to hear that real success comes from character, not possessions. Thank you for taking this journey with Jessica and me, and I hope you find the courage to choose substance over status in your own life. Until next time, may you discover the wealth that comes from loving well and living authentically.